Hey guys, welcome back to the final team selection of the season for Game Week 38, the 22-23 season. Whether you've actually watched one video or multiple videos this season, thank you guys so much for watching. Really appreciate you guys if you've been watching since Game Week 1, of course. As far as Game Week 38, my plans are loosely based around just trying to maximize on whatever leaks that we can get on the deadline. But I think it's worth talking about my transfer plans a little bit later before I just quickly run over my Game Week 37 team review. As far as the 37 team review, I think I was quite lucky from a defensive point of view because many people had to make the decision between either benching Trent or Trippier. And I think a lot of people actually ended up going with Trent because there was also a small little doubt on a potential knock on Trippier. And as it came out, Trippier was ready to play for that Leicester game. I think also we actually got enough news from Eddie Howe that he actually could play, but still Trent looking so good. And also Aston Villa playing away from home seemed to be a good enough sort of support to go for Trent. And I was lucky to really own both and to get a Trippier haul. Didn't get a Botman haul off my bench, but you know, that's how it is. Some people actually did get Trippier through Diaz and Grealish. I'm not in that position, of course, because we have been punting around with the Man City mids. Shaw, of course, a little bit sad that he only got 10 points. I think there could have been a miracle situation where he could have got subbed off in a timely manner before, let's say, João Felix scored his goal at Old Trafford. But overall with Shaw, it has been tough in Game Week 29 onwards because if you remember and cast your mind back to Game Week 29, he did get injured in the first half, I think, of that Brentford game. So he actually missed another clean sheet there and subsequently two other clean sheets, whereas people who owned De Gea actually got those clean sheets after him. But that's the way things go. The bigger issue with Shaw, of course, is what to do with him if he is truly injured. And, of course, if Man United take a precautionary approach over him starting versus Fulham, which I think is more than sensible because there's no need to risk that game necessarily, or to risk at least Shaw's back injury at this point in time. As far as the midfield, very stock standard midfield, but I was very confident in Matone and McAllister. McAllister actually looks very, very boring and dull, to be honest, in that sort of sixth role in the team. I would suggest he's probably my transfer out if I really had to pick between Matoma and McAllister, even though Matoma has actually had a lot of minutes lately. Not to mention, of course, this is an away game, so if you wanted to take a narrative, for example, that McAllister is leaving and that he's going to play in his final game, doesn't necessarily matter so much because this is no longer a home game, and of course, there's not much to play for within this specific fixture. As far as Fernandes and Rashford, I'm going to start them no matter what. I think simply it's a great game. I also think that they will get minutes, and because they don't have any sort of injury precautions hanging over them, given that Rashford also played the full 60 minutes after Anthony got injured, I do expect probably 60 to 90 minutes between the two of those players, more so with Fernandes, but for 90 minutes at least. And they're still going to be great assets because it's a home game for United, which we know that they've been absolutely terrorizing teams, and Fulham have been simply a poor defense. As far as Mitoma and McAllister, as I said, Mitoma, a little bit of a tease this week, if we're being honest. I think he's gotten multiple double-digit pointers where he's gotten much less goal involvement, and this week we actually probably saw the highest amount of goal involvement he's recorded within a single game week, and he gets 7 points only. So a little bit of reverting to the mean for Mitoma within the same season, and ultimately I think he's still been a class asset, but of course he hasn't necessarily found his finishing boots lately. As far as Salah, slightly dubious Twitter post, but I think I'm going to be playing him for next week. Potentially not a captaincy option given Jurgen Klopp's comments about where he might rotate. We also know because of the impacts of the United win and also the Newcastle draw that Liverpool effectively don't have anything to fight for given that they dropped points versus Aston Villa, and therefore there could be a genuine situation where you could see Salah even get rested a little bit earlier than usual and maybe not even start. So we do have to pay attention to that, even with Trent, for example, with the case of James Milner potentially playing at right back. As far as my forwards, of course, a little bit lucky with the transfers with Alvarez. I think the timely loss of Arsenal made Alvarez start the Chelsea game, which was the better game on paper, and Alvarez managed to do well there. I was much less enthused with him when he came on for KDB in the second game and he played in that sort of midfield role. I don't think he is really suited to that, if I'm being honest. And if I get news, for example, that Haaland and Alvarez start and even Isak was going to start, I think I might actually have a tough decision next week for both Isak and Alvarez and actually choosing who of them I would actually go for, because I much prefer Alvarez when he is the sole striker in that team. As far as Haaland, a very dismaying double game week, and potentially we could have gone with Fernandes, but given that I didn't expect Arsenal to lose versus Nottingham Forest, I think that's just pure hindsight. So it is what it is there. As far as what I would be rolling with this team, if everyone in my team was actually to start, then of course you'll see some options like Shaw, like McAllister, like Matoma that are a bit more dubious in terms of whether they'll actually start the next game. Even Isak, for example, because we know that Newcastle don't effectively have anything to play for, whereas with City, at least you can make the argument that a lot of these players need to stay fresh for the games ahead. As far as Liverpool, they also have a pretty thin team. And of course, Salah and Trent, there's not necessarily like-for-like replacements, as we know, but we have, of course, time and time again seen some replacements like a Joe Gomez at the right-back position, like a James Milner, and even maybe you could see Harvey Elliott play, or even Oxlade-Chamberlain play in that right-wing position. So that's going to be how my team looks like if I was not to make some transfers, and that would mean Alvarez on the bench, Botman on the bench. The good thing about Botman, of course, is that as long as Trippier can play, which it could be a doubt because, of course, we know recently that he was struggling with an injury, then I shouldn't really have to make defensive transfers this week, which would probably mean that my transfers would be based around the midfield. And the reason why I say that is because usually, I mean, if we look historically at FPL, midfielders are the best assets in the game when it comes to points. So if you could actually make midfielder transfers and you, let's say, get news that a Brighton defender, or rather a midfielder, was benched, then I would actually make a midfield move first, and then a forward move, and then actually a defender move last. And my transfer plans are as follows. Given that I actually think Shaw will not play, I do think going towards a Tarkowski would make sense. The alternative, of course, is to also go into someone like a Gabriel. And that probably means that I'm also going to execute a -4 down below. As you can see, it's going to be Mitoma or McAllister towards someone like an Eze. The reason why I want to go for Tarkowski is probably because I can't really see Arsenal playing for much in that Wolves game. We could see quite a bit of rotation. We're also getting news that someone like Saka has been dealing with injury, so he might not even play in that game. And so because Arsenal don't have anything to play for, I don't really necessarily like backing a clean sheet in that scenario. So therefore, I would rather go with a team like Everton, who will be absolutely fighting for their lives and to stay up, whereas Bournemouth, their opponents, will not. And in the situation of, let's say, moving between Mitoma and McAllister towards an Eze or Olise, the difference, of course, is the level of fixture. First of all, Aston Villa have something to play for, so that makes it extremely tough for Brighton, who could already be rotating. And then with Crystal Palace, I would say they've actually proven as of late, even though they've been technically on the beach, in quotes, that they are very consistent with their team lineups, that they've been playing very consistently well. And that players like Eze and Olise will get very, very good minutes over this run of games because they are the young players that this club will be building their foundation upon, and therefore Eze and Olise are great options. My issue is that unless I make a defender transfer, I can't get Eze because he's now 5.7 million and Mitoma and McAllister are only worth 5.5 million to me and my team. So I actually can't get to Eze, which therefore means I probably have to move towards Olise if I was to do one free transfer. And if I do need to force a defender move, because for example, Trent could be benched, Trippier could be benched, and Shaw could be benched as well. In that situation, if I really needed a third defender, then I could go for a move where I go for Tarkowski or Gabriel, as I mentioned, and then go for Eze in that situation. And I would prioritize Eze over Olise. But as I said, if I only need one free transfer, then I would only be executing that move from one Brighton midfielder, which is probably going to be McAllister because I prefer McAllister out right now. If, let's say, him and Mitoma were both to start and I had only one free transfer to make, I'd still probably go out of McAllister and into Olise. And that's going to be how my transfer plans lay out. And that's going to be the end of my Game Week 38 team selection. The priority of this week is to make sure that you look at your team to see if anyone is going to get benched and what you'd plan to do in that situation. For example, you could also talk about Erling Haaland if we go back quickly towards my team. I mean, if Haaland gets benched, I think I could simply go towards Kane. If Salah gets benched, you can go towards a Son now that Saka is not really an option. I might even prefer going towards someone like an Eze and then therefore making a double free transfer move. If you have that sort of access with the free transfers in your team to then go for Kane and Haaland potentially. Could also in the midfield position try to tempt yourself with someone else in this Liverpool team. So for example, if you got news that Gakpo started, I think you could also go towards there. This is a week where in your head you need to be building transfers ahead as far as the deadline goes. Another option as well could be simply going back to someone like Watkins. We talked about how this Aston Villa team have absolutely something to play for, and therefore Watkins would be a great asset to go for as well in that scenario. I'm not so high potentially on a Spurs defender or even a Villa defender, even though they have games to play for and that they're very important. But you could also tempt yourself with someone like a Maddison from Leicester, as I'm not a huge fan either of someone like Castagne at this point in time. So Maddison would probably be my one differential in the midfield that I would think about now that Saka doesn't really seem or appear to be an option. And if you don't really want to back someone like Son, who has honestly had a very, very inconsistent season and isn't even on, let's say, free kicks anymore. as far as I can see. So one of the big things with Madison, of course, is that he could be on penalty. So he could be an absolute ace in the hole in this game where they're playing versus a West Ham team who'll probably rotate ahead of the Europa Conference League final. So those are kind of my thoughts overall. I wanted to kind of cover different scenarios for different players, not even necessarily for my own team, but also what would happen for other players and their prospective transfers. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys potentially next season.